Hello, and welcome to episode 492 of the Decide for Impact podcast. Today, you're listening to the conversation with Mila Aliana. Mila works in the messy, uncharted spaces where complexity lives across industries, sectors, coalitions, and multi-stakeholder systems, where things are no longer working and no one quite knows how to navigate what's next. Mila tends to work at the level of patterns and relationships, helping people see what's really shaping behavior beneath the surface, not just what's visible. Her practice has been shaped by working across very different contexts, from governments and global consortiums to sitting with indigenous elders, and Mila brings that into how she holds spaces for people to sense, relate, and move differently together. At the moment, she is closely involved with stewarding the transition of the Inner Development Goals ecosystem, staying with the tension between structure, culture, and what it actually takes to shift how we lead and work. My name is Erno Hannink, and I share my knowledge, experience, and expertise with you. I coach entrepreneurs so they make decisions that will help them to grow their impact. In this conversation with Mila, I learned so much about working differently based on relationships and how to make impact and how it does maybe impact my personal ego. Let's get started. Welcome in this new podcast episode. Today, I'm talking to Mila Aliana.
Yes. Thank you. Very honored.
Yes, I am very honored that you're here. So thank you for being here. I got to know you. I've heard your name on several occasions when I was in the Inner Development Goals environment. I was very active on the Global Participants Network.
Yes.
Very active in my own community here that we organize meetings every month for. And then I finally met you in Cole last year.
Yes, that's right.
When we had the conversations about the ambassadors. And I found that you were like a breath of fresh air and calmness in all these heated debates that were happening around ambassadors. We need this and we need this. And
yeah,
I was going like, what are you doing? I didn't understand what these people were just so mad about.
Yes.
And you were just very calm, asking questions, listening, bringing calm to the meeting. And I was very impressed with how you did that. I'm very happy that you were there. And even though you were just there a day and a half, you just very short, like a breath of fresh air. So then I decided, I'm going to just intro this, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
then I decided to, because I have this great project, also a large project that I'm working on right now, building my new house with my wife. And so I'm doing all the installation work myself. I want to be as much as I can with the builder. It's bio-based, it's with wood, it's everything as good as I can afford. So I decided last December to say, I'm going to stop the Global Participants Network. I have no space for the monthly meetings to organize everything.
Yeah.
And then the request came along. We have this transition going on. We need volunteers who is willing to help you.
Yeah.
And I felt the calling. I felt like I have to do this. I have to be part of this. I don't know how to find time, but I have to be part of this. So that's how we met again, because you are running this. But that's just an intro, a long one.
Yes.
But it's okay. It's an intro of how I got to know you and why I want to have a conversation with you. My first real question for you is, you call yourself a chief weaver. Well, somebody who's weaving.
Mm-hmm.
What does a weaver do, and how do you become a weaver?
So I think I'll start with how do you become a weaver? It's really organically born because we are all weavers, funnily enough. And it was just a conversation with one of my clients, and he says, what you actually do, and I shared, because normally when I have clients, it's very challenging for them to give me a label. I'm not a strategic advisor only. I'm not a consultant only. I can also coach when I need to, but mainly big, huge collaborations, consortiums into really messy, uncharted territories, or it's been tried before, but they just don't know how because it's so complex, right? And there's usually multi-stakeholder engagement from various industries and sectors that probably never talked to each other before. So one of my clients just said, "So what actually do you do?" And I said, "Well, it's really challenging because what I do isn't just advising; I actually deliver also. And so it's how do we translate something that is so uncharted, it's so complex, and usually people get very stuck because it's so complex, and it's people haven't even attempted to understand how to actually enter a complex system that is constantly adaptive, constantly dynamic, changing every single moment, or that they've tried several ways, but it's just, they've hired the big McKinseys, all the different consultants, very pricey, and it never works. And fundamentally, the weaving that I call it's actually two things: weaving and wayfinding, which every single individual actually have. And this is part of my indigenous culture. The weaving is not just weaving people, is weaving, being able to look at what people, when they come together, what is the relationship they co-create? What is the dynamics they create, right? And very few look at that. They just look at the individuals, the elements, and it's not just people. It could be like the marketing department versus the technology department versus the legal department. But what do you create? What is what we call the third entity? What is the relationship that you create, that you're weaving, creating, that is invisible, but it's there? When we have oxygen, it's invisible, but it's there. Just try to stop breathing for a second, and there's something that exists that's co-created, not just by ourselves spending out CO2, but also with the planet, with the plants, with everything, that the atmosphere, everything. So that's the same, because that is how living system works. When we say system, it's really relationship that we co-create, that becomes dynamic, that weaves together. And in that is not just relationship between elements and people, it's relationship between dimensions, between time, between past, present, and future. That includes narrative, right? So if you have a narrative or trauma that's been intergenerational, that's woven into the fabric of life from generation to generation, and often unexamined. So my weaving is also making what Otto Scharmer talks about. How do you make the system see itself? So between the stimuli and response, people have freedom of choice of the relationship they're co-creating that perhaps is no longer supporting them or appropriate for context or fit for the timing. Let's say like a narrative of you have to go to school for 4 years, spend so much money that you become into debt. You have to have a PhD, you have to have a master's. Is that really true, right? In this time, if you look at Gen Z, they're doing work like nomads, and they're not having titles or PhD and whatever, and they're very, very successful. So sometimes it's also questioning, weaving what is there to then weave something else, that in system we say, what conditions are we creating, what patterns are we creating that creates a reinforcing behavior that no longer serves us in this moment, in this context. So what can we weave together as relationships, whether it's people, whether it's time, whether, to fit the context, to fit the uncharted territory that we're going into. So that's what weaving. And in my culture, time is my kin, because I'm constantly in relationship to time. Either time can run me, or can I see time as something sometimes I have to surrender, because it's this illusion of control, because those dynamics of co-creating those relationships cannot depend on one person. So if you take, for example, a culture, if you blame one individual to create the toxicity, if that person leaves, the toxicity still kind of exists in the co-created culture that allowed for that behavior to continue. So yes, that person still holds responsibility, but the whole culture have weaved that into place. In this regard, it's like silence, right? Because there's no so that the whole group has created a space that is not psychological safe. That is every single individual. It's not one person that can create that. So if a toxic behavior that continues and continues and the whole group is silent, that is weaving a toxic behavior that no one wants to take accountability, right? So I said about wayfinding. So
Sure.
wayfinding is the orientation. But the orientation isn't something that you analyze on a piece of paper. There is that, but there's also orientation. So weaving also allows for people to access their own kind of compass, inner compass. So think about when you go into a room, you can sense what's going on into that room, even if you can't quite articulate it. There's a co-created dynamics that's invisible, and you can feel the tension or the happiness, even if people faces were different, right? So that is something that every individual has access to. That's kind of being able to access the weaving that is being co-created, not just through the head, but also through like a fine-tuning fork of a piano. You can, it's like vibration frequency, and you can't articulate it. And the wayfinding is like, you know that you have to go to this route, right? Your house, right? You have a vision, you have an orientation. It needs to be like this, but you don't know step by step what that would look like. You have some kind of vision. You know the builders will bring something, will, to the table, but you have a North Star, right? So that's a wayfinding, not only in your head, but some deep knowing. So if you have a whole group of people have a deep knowing, like a social movement, to have the same why, the same North Star, think of the weaving of different ways of behavior that allows for that North Star to manifest consistently. That's what I'm talking about, weaving and wayfinding. And that is a very indigenous culture. For the wayfinding is basically Polynesians that can cross 10,000 miles across the channel with no navigational tools, modern navigational tools, and use even the slightest movement of the wave. They know where tsunamis are coming, where the wind is coming. They know an island is about there, so the island comes to them instead of them coming to the island, because the vision is so strong that it will manifest itself. And because they know the birds and the flock of birds, the temperature, the stars, it's a lot of different things. We've lost it because we actually have that. We can orient in a room towards something that we know is, it's not even about morals, but our whole body knows our inner compass. And sometimes we disregard, and in Arno Mendel talks about quantum flirts. So it could be like a flirt, but we're so not attuned and present enough to listen to our own inner compass. We forsake it for social conformity or social belonging. And that's what I meant by wayfinding. It keeps the integrity, like even you with your house, even if you're going to face challenges, even if you're now doing some work for the transition working group, even with the transition working group, you just knew, as you said, you just knew you had an orientation, a wayfinding compass that tells you, I'm so busy, but I need to be here. There's no logic to that, right? But if we all followed that, guess what will happen, right? Everybody is attuned to a larger kind of vibration that allows us to come together without saying, well, I need to influence you to be in the same direction as me, right? And in the transition working group, that's what I said. I said, if you feel called, then that's it. But step back if you feel that's an obligation, because it's your whole body that will want you to be there. And that's how social movement stays for a very long time, because it calls into the wayfinding of the inner compass. It calls into all of you co-weaving together new dynamics, new behaviors, new patterns, constant experimenting what works in this context, in this time. That's basically what weaving means. I hope that covers it a little bit.
That's a lot.
What are you taking away from it?
Well, I was thinking about the house building and about the systems that you were talking about, and the way that I'm now aligning with the system of the builder. Right, the builder has a system of building his house, and I have to kind of like align my calendar all the time to his work.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the leader in this. Obviously, we paid him to build the house.
Yes.
With he has a lot of knowledge. We trust him to build a great house. But also, as I'm the owner, but I'm also the installer. I need to be in sync with him every time when the next step of the installation needs to be done. I need to be ready because otherwise he will be stalled because of the work that I'm not completed on time. So, and I also thought about the weaving, about the silence you were talking about, right? So I was thinking about the fascism that is growing in the
Yes.
world, in Europe as well. I just read this piece about the changes that was going on in Czechia this morning, and yes, we can take away the leader of a nation like that, right? We can say, like they did in Venezuela, you take the leader out, but that doesn't change the system, right? It just is a temporary shock, but then it just starts again because the system internal in this country doesn't change because you just take out because people accepted the way that this is happening in the meantime, right? They weave, like you mentioned, they weave the culture in their, communities and everything. And yes, fascism doesn't just happen by a leader. A
Mm-hmm.
leader takes chance of the culture, the notion, the feelings that's there, and just uses that for his story and how he spins it. And it's usually a he that I mean, I
Yes.
would say a she, but in this case, it's usually a he. And that's why he finds a fertile soil to spread his message and to take people along with very clear wordings saying this is the direction that should be going, and people will just follow because it's easier to
Yes.
follow a clear leader
Yes.
than
Yes.
follow people like you who are very messy and it's not clear so you all the time say we are going somewhere in that direction. We know that where we're coming from, we can't use it anymore. We're going I don't know where we're going. We have to together find how we get there, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
very messy kind of system and
Mm-hmm.
process that we're in. So for most people that's very intimidating
Yes.
and confusing and frightening. And if you look for more certainty and control, this is not the process that you want to be part of. That's what I'm taking away of this.
And control, as I said, is a coping strategy when
Mm,
we are facing uncertainty. So that is, a lot of our behaviors are based on certain conditions or environment that makes us go there because it's a form of coping strategy. When you don't have psychological safety, you become silent. You become agreeable, or you become defensive, right? So those are coping mechanisms sometimes from human. It's not an individual trait. It's co-created in the dynamics that we all co-create together,
mhm,
including psychological safety. So the easiest to say that the weaving is about, to your point, holding and connecting what is not yet seen, what is not yet connected, people, perspectives, tensions, histories, possibilities, which is really difficult, right? Because we're not seeing it, but we're trying to weave coherence across all of this that is not yet connected through the sensing, right? Through the sensing. And the wayfinding is basically how do you move when there's no clear path? That's what you said, basically. And it's not about finding the way with certainty, but finding the way by listening to the system as it unfolds. So, in a way, how my work fits together with weaving, which is a very specific skill. So I don't have, websites or anything like that because it's all referrals. The weaving and wayfinding are inseparable in the way I operate because the weaving creates the relational field. So that relational field is not just humans, right? So it's looking at the patterns, at the tensions, at the possibilities, and weaving that together to make it conscious by listening to the system, not trying to control it. Then the wayfinding moves within that field. by listening to the system as it unfolds from one emergence to another. So basically, my work is always in uncharted territories because there's no map. And most people run the other way. I run towards it because that's where the most possibility of change will happen, and not incremental change. And how do you weave the relationship in the no map territory? And how do you sense to navigate in that as it emerges, not as you control it? So then the system kind of moves forward together, and that gives the most satisfaction because you have everyone gains their own dignity and their own kind of agency, individual as well as collective, in solidarity to move forward in a system that is starting to just manifest itself, and we're co-creating it from moment to moment.
I was remembering one other thing I thought about was, and you're now talking about this as well, is how we as humans in general feel that we are in the center of everything, that we need to control because we are the species who knows the most, who's the most experienced, has most brain. So that's why we should be on top of everything. And as you describing, it is more like a system, and we are like a part of the system, right? It's not just a system of a technological thing or like a organizational thing, not even just a community thing, but it's a system of everything, right? It's a system of how we are part of the whole.
Yeah.
And then you spoke about your past, about where you're coming from, about your relatives, your relationships from the past. Do you think that somehow the culture where you're coming from has more respect for this being part of the whole system, or and not being on top of the system, or is it something that you've learned yourself differently?
So it's both. So I grew up with that culture, but also I was a curious learner. So I always wanted to see how does the things that I'm learning from sensing and knowing this is kind of the truth, how can it be supported by science? And as we know, the science have caught up with some of not just indigenous, but some of the rural communities, even your ancestry have caught up with some of the things that our ancestry across the world, and I'm mainly using ancestry rather just indigenous because we're all indigenous to our land. So there has been a lot of wisdom and knowledge that now the science have shared. And fundamentally, that we are all participants in life, not answers, right? And fundamentally, that we are all relational, that everything is interdependent. So everything matters, whether it's time, whether it's relationship. So, as for example, when we had COVID, and before that, I already knew that there's no CEO in your body. Every morning you wake up, it's already cleaned up. All the toxin has been taken out when you're sleeping. There's no CEO. You were not in control of your body. And that's the same as life itself. So during COVID, I found out how our immune system works. It has a whole war strategy of, I don't know, 4 or 5 different battalions that face any kind of disease. There's the first battalion, then the second battalion, the third battalion. And no one, especially our intelligence, control that. It's something that happens organically, that because the kidney and the heart and the liver are working together, there's if we the kidney just says, oh, I'm going to work by myself and I can control everything, our whole body would die. The same thing with the whole living system that we all sit in. There's nested ecosystem that are all interrelated. So as a young kind of indigenous or from my ancestors, we knew that. We knew that because it's how life works around us all the time. But the sciences have have proven that. But unfortunately, I don't think it's gone into education where it's now cellular. Most people who live with the land, who live in nature, it's cellular. We know that everything is interconnected um, through time, and time, as one example, in what our Earth was created 4.6 billion years ago. It took a billion years to get water onto Earth, right? And it was apparently part of it was alien form. Another billion years before oxygen that nearly killed us to come on Earth. So time can be very, very long, but it's still very much interrelational. And so coming back to what you're saying, if we place we are the center of everything, yet the world exists around us, for us, are all dependent of each other, then how are we the center of it when we can't even be the center of our own body, right? So that's and that has never been forgotten in the indigenous ways of knowing across the world, including our ancestors. If you really live in nature, that's never something that's not forgotten. That the land is not a resource, but is our relative. The time is our kin, is not the past behind us, but also present and also future. And our ancestors' knowledge continues like a relay team. So everything that I do is beyond my lifetime because I'm just part of the relay team that passes down to the next generation. It's not going to happen, Mila, hero of the century. That this is what living system. So living system or nature, its governance system is relationship. It's not control. There's no policy. There's no 1,000 pages document. It's all about how do we stay connected in order for the work to be done, because everything is interdependent, similar to my body. The kidney can't go off and say, I'm going to create my own profit entity and not rely and completely compete with the liver and with the heart. Then my body would just die. And this is the illusion of control, the illusion of separation that most humans, often, including myself, are arrogantly thinking when we try to control almost everything in our life, when actually part of our lives is not anything that we can control except how we show up. That is in our control.
It feels very comforting on one end, right? That for me, let's put it that way. I will make it personal. For me, it feels very comfortable, not knowing that I'm not in control. I'm just a tiny part of the whole continuous circle, like the relay team, like you just said. So I have no dreams or ego or hope that I will become famous, because I think it's not important, right? So maybe a person is famous for a couple hundred years, but
Mhm.
like 8 billion are not, right? So it's like a tiny,
Yeah.
tiny, tiny part of the people who are famous for a couple hundred years, but then they're forgotten anyway.
Yes.
Maybe like the Romans, right? The Roman emperors, but it's all history. But that's not a lot of people compared to the amount of time that we spent on this
Mm-mm.
planet already.
Yeah.
And so it's very liberating to think that you don't have to, I don't, let's again make it personal. I don't have to worry about to become famous or whatever, because it's not really important. At the same time, I feel it's kind of like scary, or not scary.
Discomfort.
Yeah, because the thing is, does it really matter what I do, right? So that's again a similar feeling that I'm having, right? So at the same time, I believe, okay, I can do whatever I want because it's not important that I become famous. So I can do really important stuff, right? I can do the things that I think is really important, like building things that are for the next generations, so that we build a place where the next generations can thrive or live without a lot of discomfort that we've
Mm-hmm.
experienced, that we tend to, we may
Mm-hmm.
experience in the future. But at the same time, it also feels like sometimes I feel like, wow, does it really matter what I do? Because you don't see the consequences of what you do, or just it takes a long time. Like this afternoon, you mentioned something that you worked on, right? A project that you worked on, and it took 3 years. 3 years, right, to get it. And that's in the long space, like you mentioned, time. It's our kin. It's not. it's a long thing, right? It's not like 3 years is nothing. It's like a breath into a total. But of
Mm-hmm.
your life as an individual, it's three
Mm-hmm.
years. It's a long time. You have to make sure that you were talking about having all the connections, having all the conversations with all these parties and all these people involved. So there, I get the feeling. So does it really matter what I do? And then, of course, you get a confirmation because then there were three new laws coming up, and now you have a law for young people under 16 are not allowed to be on social media because it's really toxic. So yes, that's something I feel like on and off, right?
Yeah.
I need to do that is something that I feel is, for the next generations important. Does it really matter what I do?
Yes. So does it actually matter? Right? So that's the fundamental question. So it matters, but not in the way we're thinking. Not as a legacy, not as recognition, not as something that we can measure or I can measure or guarantee, right? But it's what matters is in the relationship and the learning that you get out of it, because we're only here for one life. And how do you make possible for others in that moment to be the best versions of themselves? How do you create nourishing soils for others, even if you can never see them grow? In living system, nothing is wasted. Everything is regurgitated. Abundance constantly flows. It doesn't stay in one place. But nothing is controlled either. So the question is more, does it matter what I do? But can I do feels true even if I never know or be attached to what it becomes? Can I be part of life moving without needing to be the one who makes it matter? Especially if we're going to be one part of solidarity. So the kidney doesn't get confirmation, but my whole body does. It keeps me alive. Same thing with living system, right? And let's loosen, kind of be very real of what one can do, right? So have you ever had an opportunity where you talk to someone many years ago, and then later on they come back to you and said, do you know that one time you said something, it has helped me to be the person that I am today? That has happened to me a couple of times, and I've heard other people. So sometimes we don't even know. It could be such a inconsequential kind of sentence, task, word, but it has a ripple effect. And the science have proven this, right? So that something, a tiny ripple, let's say a stone that you throw in a pond that follows a stream that goes into the river, that goes into sea, has ripple effect underneath. And this is scientifically proven that there's something, they call it the butterfly effect, right? So if you have a you flap your wings in one corner of the world, suddenly it will create a thunderstorm. I mean, it's not to that point. But think about how movement actually starts. That one person, Einstein, for example, he he created all of this amazing work, but then one day at a certain point in time, he was at a certain place at the right timing, and something had a ripple effect. And sometimes you don't even know until months later, or never know until you die. So the question is, does it matter to you that you know? But what matters is that it does impact whether you know it or not. But the question then becomes, does it matter to you? And why does it matter to you? If you are already impacting whether you're not, you know it or not, because there's so many invisible patterns that are happening. Even you showing up to do some of the online work, it's already impacting a lot of people at reading the online platform and the transition that we do, and you don't know how much that has impacted them. So the question is, does it matter what I do, or does it matter that I don't know what I
Hmm.
do that has impacted everyone? Because then that takes away, in our kind of culture, it's like what can I do that goes beyond my lifetime?
Hmm.
Because beyond my lifetime, I'm already dead. I don't know what would happen, right? And it's not work by Mila, it's work with Erno, with everybody else. It's not one person, because not one person can make these changes in the world. It takes a whole village to educate a child, it takes a whole village for us to move. And everywhere you see in life, it's not one stone or one leaf that's going to make changes. It's everything in synchronicity of ecosystems that are interdependent of each other that's going to make those ripple effects.
Hmm. Okay, then I feel it. So I'm not saying I'm not struggling with it. I will still struggle with it, but I feel it. Then there is a question that I think really has a lot of people who work in this space of inner development, for example, or the SDGs, struggle with. How do I make a living from this? Right?
Yes.
So you do this work for the inner development goals at the moment as a volunteer, like I.
Hmm.
And then you have all these other projects going on. And I think what a lot of people are interested in, how do you find ways to make a living from all these projects and at the same time do contribute to, the future of the next generations?
Yeah. So the key is one, boundaries. So I give my time voluntarily, because I also receive a lot of kind of pay or remuneration that's quite substantial for me to say to myself, I want to give back. How do I pay forward? But also being very clear of boundaries, not to overgive, um, carry purpose to then burn out, which a lot of change makers do, and social entrepreneurs, by the way. So there is a clear system design gap where people who gives value do not get remunerated. Unfortunately, this is the capitalistic system that we're in. So how do I make a living, but I stay true and be of integrity to the work that I'm doing without making myself disappear, because then I'm not completely valued, don't end up earning. So the number one motto that I've followed since I been working for 30, 40 years, and sometimes I have to pause and surrender to it, is that if I create value, money will follow. And I've done this for startups. So I've set up my own and it became very successful twice, because I created value, and it wasn't something that I fell in love with my own product, which is a very typical startup phase. You fall in love with your product, your service. What I did was I created it and talked to my potential customers and co-created that product or service through understanding the exact needs of the customer, not literally what they say. So similar to Ford, he asked his customers, for the car manufacturer, what would you like to have? And they said faster horses. So our job is to translate that. And so he then went back and forth, and that's what I did. What I understood was always, how do I work with the very people that I'm actually serving, whether it's a for profit or not for profit? How do I co create? And as you know, in the transition working group with the volunteers, how do I co create how we move forward together? Not by myself, because that's the only way that it can sustain itself beyond myself. And everybody then sees value, because it's not about me. It's not about my product. It's not about my service. It's what people need, and I'm serving what people are needing. So to ground it into very real pathways, translate what you work into something that people can pay for in their language. So right now, if I said system sensing, regeneration, because I'm a regenerative practitioner also, one of the things I say, well, do you face challenges in navigating complexity? Most times, yes, right? Leadership in uncertainty. Do you have fragmentation in your organization? And how do you make decisions in transition, right? So you're clearly framing the value. And sometimes I don't even say it, like inner development. I give the experience, a brief experience of what that is. And then people go, oh, I get it. And often my clients would say, yeah, Mila doesn't have a label, but when she does it, you know it, right? So, so it's really understanding yourself and understanding your but in order to understand your customers or the people who can pay, you have to do a lot of listening. You have to do a lot of not falling in love with your product or services, falling in love with their needs, with their challenges. So some of the work that I'm doing is with family offices, as you know. Like, so I've been asking for 3 years now for next gen philanthropists, family offices, wealthy individuals. I don't ask for money. I literally just say, what are what keeps you up at night? And I'm starting to see patterns, and I'm starting to build relationship. And what I've learned a long time ago, when I was managing like hundreds and hundreds of projects and programs, I was working with a sales and marketing team, and they were one of the best sales team in the world. And the marketing and sales team told me that they never sell anything. They do not sell. They build relationship. And through the relationship, there's trusted long-term kind of build up. So when something is happening, they go, oh, do you know, I think your organization is doing this. I'd love to try out your product. So they never sell the product or service. It's only when they see there's a challenge and there's a match, that's when they talk about it, or an invitation. And that's another cultural motto that I have, which is don't go where you're not invited, because then it's harder. You have to spend lots of money to market, behavioral, scientists to nudge people to like your product. But if people are already trusting you, you're already building they see the value for them. And the other thing that I do is not only for the person for the that I'm giving service to, the customer or the beneficiaries, how does that value add value not only to their ecosystem, but the ecosystem that rely on them and the ecosystem that it actually impacts? Because then you're dealing with the nested ecosystem, the ripple effect that we talked about, not just to the direct customers, but to the people across. So for example, if your product and services serve your customer, but it doesn't serve their suppliers, right? Like for SDG, for example, SDG sometimes, even in family offices, they have to meet the ESG, etc. So the actual cost goes down into the downstream to the suppliers. So then you have to think about, if this is the case, you're creating ESG for your business, especially for family offices. How do you ensure that it doesn't go down to the suppliers who don't even have that much money, and so you're impacting them? So it will stop. So the people that's relying on you or bringing in some kind of value to your product is also going broke. There's no way that can continue going forward, right? So you just find other suppliers, but then other suppliers will also run out of money eventually. So it's understanding not only the person that you're serving, how can you co-create the value with them, but co-create the value for the whole ecosystem. So the whole ecosystem would want you to survive. And that's basically how I get paid. And you separate survival from purpose, right? Because if you're focusing on scarcity, people can smell that a mile away. So, what is it that you really are of integrity, coming back to your wayfinding? What is it that's uniquely yours? And it's not, so we can have the same shades of blue, but I deliver a way of a shade of blue that's different to you. And it's not me and you competing. It's just certain people like my shade of blue and some people like your shade of blue. If people realize that, then they would collaborate even more. And this is what we call mutual reciprocity. You design for reciprocity, not design for transactional relationships. And that's when you start getting money and people follow the value and they would be willing to pay the money for that. It needs to flow in many multiple ways.
Yes. And what I see is that, and that has a lot to do with the capitalistic neoliberal system that we are in, is that people love control, right?
Yes.
So if we put in $100 into advertising and we get $102 out, we can spend $1,000 and we get 110,000, 1,100
Yeah.
dollars. So so we see people doing this. We see people trying to scale connections, trying to scale context, trying to scale points of moments where they are in front of potential customers, and the only thing that they care about is how many people in the end come out of the funnel, right? So
Yeah.
they just
Yes.
say, "Oh, my message goes to 1,000 people, and when I get 10, that's fine with me." And you're the way I see it, what you do, and I love what you do, is that you care more about like 20 people and have conversations with 20 people, and like five of those come out and they call you at a certain point, you don't know when, but they call you at a certain point saying, "Oh, I have this issue right now and I have the feeling that you can help me here." And there's like two projects out there as well who are interested in your work and they can't afford to pay you, and you decide, "Oh yeah, I really want to support this work," and then you do that. And it's a way of working that is built a lot on trust, on the trust of yourself, of that you can sustain in this way of living, that you can survive in a way.
Hmm.
But it's also trusting in the system that at some point, like you just mentioned before, when you do the right things, money will follow, right? When you make impact, when you have impact on people, the money will follow. So you trust the system. And I think that's a very different way that people today are trained of how we should work. And we can see it in the inner development world where there's like practitioners who really, really want to work with inner development goals in a
Yeah.
way that they like to make money with them.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
only thing they care about is how many people see the development goals in front of them and how many people they can sell it to, instead
Yeah.
of really caring about people, how we make the change internally as a community, as people, and so that we can contribute to a better world for the next generations.
Yeah. And it's not wrong. It's
No.
just to be in right relationship. So in living system, it's called mutual reciprocity.
Hmm.
There's four criteria based on, if you look at biomimicry, they were funded by 20 big corporations to find out what was mutual reciprocity like in living system. And it's very easy. So if we go move to transactional, what you're talking about is, for me, it's transactional. So I give you value, you give me value, but it's just what's in it for me. There's no relationship. If anything happens between us, I'll just drop you and find somebody else, right? That's very transactional, and that's very, very much what has been happening throughout many, many organizations, and that's okay. This is the mainstream. But with trusted relationship, as I said, the greater salespeople don't do that. They don't sell. They create relationship. Marketing, they build relationship. And that has a longer term. And the key question there is, are we able to support each other and learn from each other? And whether we have to navigate across challenges, we will still support each other. So in the old days, company, the word company comes from Latin word of compagnere, which means we break bread together. That's how commerce started. It was through relationship. They bartered the bread with the chicken and whatever, but they sat down and ate and drank together. That is the word company. And yet, right now, it's all about competition. And actually, in living system, competition is available, but very limited. It's actually collaboration that makes people be able to go and survive. Charles Darwin was misquoted to say it's survival of the fittest, but actually it's survival of the most adaptive to each other, right? So mutual reciprocity, there's four criteria. One, you'll understand this because you see it in living system, you see it in your body. Number one, does it give mutual benefit to each other? Yeah, so that's the first one, that in most transaction is, do I get benefit? Do you get benefit? Fine, but that's it, right? The second one is it complementary? So even if we are providing the same shades of blue, the same product, but there's something that is specifically mine, specifically yours, that's complementary. The third one is all about, are you adaptive to change? Right? If suddenly my business because of COVID doesn't work, are you going to just drop me? Or do we find a way to adapt? Like, certain places that just suddenly started creating, what's it called? Those
Masks.
mask, right? They came together and created masks that they weren't doing. They were doing plastic or something. So that's being adaptive together, because that is how living system. You have constantly changing. So how do you do that? And I think that the third one is about, availability. So if I need you to support me with your complementary product or service, I don't wait for you to go off and study it for a year, or that you have to wait for the transport to arrive a year later, right? So is it readily available? So that's what it means by mutual reciprocity. That's kind of the logic, kind of living system. But fundamentally, it's all about breaking bread together. And the relationship just happens. And I know someone who works with land, and he's a property agent for wealthy family businesses across the whole of the UK. And he says, I'm not really a land estate property estate agent, because all of my family estate landowners, who typically hold their land for decades for their children and whatever, treats him as their psychotherapist. They'll just call him, I've had this, because of the relationship. But guess where those landlords would go to when they're ready to sell the land? And in one go, one fell swoop, he will have millions by selling that land, because he will get a percentage from it. And this happened to me so many times, where I've had to invest in something, trusted it, and and this has happened several times now, within a month, I got, a 6 or 7 figure income to do a project, it felt like there was no relationship between one or the other. But I knew differently. I knew there was something that I gave value. And for some reason, there was something in the air. And sometimes they even know each other. And because of that, then I get offered. Sometimes I'm not even right for the job. I don't have the skills, I don't have the qualifications. But because they trust me and they see the work, I get the job. I get the contract. So it is more longer term, and I don't have to prove anything. That's the other thing. If you have to have it transactional, you're constantly trying to prove that you are the right person. But if there's this trusted relationship, there's no micromanaging. They just trust you. And most of my work is, there's no micromanaging. I get full authority, full budget, and I just report once at regular time. But I don't get somebody asking me left, right, and center, have you done this, have you done that? Because there's mutual trust. So it's a very different type of relationship, type of work, and it becomes very spacious for all parties. It's still challenging, because people are messy, and I always say design for messy, including myself. But that part of the work, I don't need to prove myself in the way that typically one would have to do if it was very transactional.
Yeah, the interesting part, if you look at your LinkedIn profile, for example, there's not a lot of confirmation of what you do and what projects you run, and no website, not million followers, nothing like that. And still, when I talk with you, when I speak with you, it's very clear that you've done some really great projects in the past.
Yeah.
So I think it also makes it easier for people to have a conversation with you.
Hmm.
There's no reason for them to look up to you, to feel threatened by you, to, oh, they sometimes may show their own ego, and
Oh,
but I,
sometimes I get dismissed,
yeah,
which is,
I can
yeah,
imagine. Yeah, yeah, I can
which is
imagine.
wonderful. I love being dismissed. You get shit done.
And there was another thing I'm wondering about is how do you make decisions on which, because if like you trust the system, projects come to you at the right time, how do you make decisions of what projects you take on and which ones do you pass on?
So this comes to my spiritual level, and I might have your participants starting to wonder about me, but I don't apologize for it because I tell my clients. So the decisions is a deep, deep knowing, the wayfinding. So I'll give an example. So I was invited to be the board, and this is not paying, but volunteering to be the board of IDG. At first, I heard I was skeptic, but then my whole deep knowing, my body didn't want it, but my deep knowing said, no, you have to be here. And as you know, it's quite a struggle, especially during this transition. Many times I've had even told the board that I'm ready to quit because, it's volunteering, long hours, but there's a huge deep knowing, like you had a deep knowing about, although you have a lot on, you have to be in this transition working group. Similar to me, because I feel there's something sacred that this is about to happen that we none of us know. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to be known for it. I'm not going to, but there is something that is hugely strong. And this is the same in almost every work that I have. And I'm paid very well. And that is like, why? When the first time I'm offered, the first time I was offered a role that was with scientists, technologists, all very heady people, and yeah, technologists, AI, scientists, academic. And I'm going, what in the hell am I doing here? Because that's not something that I like, right? It's just so heady. And it took 6 months for me to then understand what it was. And it went to this law that I ended up, and there was no relationship at the very beginning. I wouldn't have known if I did not go through the 6 months. And then that after 6 months, that was the offer on the table. There was nothing that gave me any indication that I will be impacting 80 million children in a law and was well paid, well supported. So that's what I'm saying. But I had a deep knowing in that first moment. And it started out as a voluntary role. And I knew that I needed to stay. I really wanted to leave, but I knew I wanted to stay. And again, the same thing happened. I had 5 patterns of different people from across the world referring me to a role, to entity, an organization that each one of them didn't know each other. One from was it from Brussels introduced me to someone in San Jose. San Jose took me back to Berlin. Within a day of each other, half an hour, they just met me. And these are people who just met me, not even, but they knew the trusted relationships that I had. We had mutual connections and they knew about my work. And then I was referred to another person in New Jersey. By that time, I was given a role, literally a job, right? So I didn't I didn't say I wanted a role from the very beginning. It was through the trusted relationship. And the moment we spoke, the person said, I think you're the person that's right for the job. Right. So it's that. And then sometimes I will be offered a really great paying role with a great title. And I would say no on the other flip coin because I could feel it. I could feel in my bones that this is, and this is the trust that I have cultivated about boundaries, where my boundaries, because I call it the shiny object. It's very shiny. It's an MD, it's a CEO role, lots of money, lots of bling bling and whatever. But I just knew in my soul it would be so problematic in many ways. And it's now that I'm so much older, I know where I need to go. Not so I don't go for survival. I don't go for scarcity. If I go for scarcity, I know it's the wrong thing. Then I have to find a different way to get funding, rather than, yes, of course we need to, if there's no money on the table, you need this, then find something that just kind of brings you some money, but not necessarily the money, right? But you're not committing for long term. And you can have two, three work. And sometimes what I've been told, this whole purpose thing is actually misunderstood, because you can have two or three roles that is not your purpose work, but you can then create your purpose role just to get your income. So there's many different ways, and I don't think the way that I do things I invite everybody else to do it, because it was specific contextually to me. My invitation is to find your own way, but do not be guided by scarcity. If you are guided by scarcity, find something to tie you over for a while, but be very clear of the wayfinding, where you don't know where it's trying to take you, but that's where you're heading. Like your house, right? Like knowing that you have to be transition working, but you didn't know what it was. It was just a very deep knowing. And sometimes we don't listen. That's why I say this quantum flirt. It was like a flirt, but you're not listening to it, if you're not present to it and really understanding what you're here for, um, it's very different. So sometimes I fire my own clients
Mm.
because it gives so much problems. More, so there's something different about getting into challenges and politics, but then if it becomes more into integrity, in more into, I don't know, some ethical challenges, that may be the time for you to step back,
Hmm.
even if it's paying really, really well. And we often don't do that, especially if we have a business. But down the line, it will create so much problem, and we see this again and again and again. And so when you have these kind of long-term trusted relationship, it's a safety net that you
Mm.
don't have to think about so much.
Yeah, I remember the words that I wrote down after a meeting in Amsterdam
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago. Uh, the difference between transactional and relational. So I wrote down for myself. I need to focus more. I want no, not I need. I want to focus more on relational work, relationships,
Yeah.
instead of transactional relationships. So yeah, I think I'm not perfect in that sense, but I
I
do
think
believe
not.
I do believe in the importance of it for myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think none of us are perfect,
Yeah.
but it's just about experimenting what works for each one of us, right? So I'm not condoning anyone to follow my footsteps, because
Mm.
it's my context. So think about, we met a few weeks ago in person with other people. Look, within what, a month, we're now able to do a 3-day event, one for family business, the other for businesses and institution, and the third for youth. Who would have said that? Because I trusted. Remember, I said in Amsterdam, I knew something was going to happen in Amsterdam. I trusted it, and I didn't know. I didn't plan it. It's only when we started sitting down, something emerged in the energy of us co-creating. This is the weaving that happened
Yeah.
in that room,
Yeah.
and look where we are now. And this is manifesting in real life, and people don't believe it. When it's ready, if you really listen to it, it flows so naturally. And because we all had a real trust already between us. I was with Erno, not Erno, with Wico already in ambassador program. I got to know Ivy through OSA, from Transition Working Group. there was already an established trust, even though we don't know each other that well.
Hmm.
But it flew like, with Peter Senge going, yes. And then now we've got artists coming, we got you coming, family offices. Who would have known if I said that at the very start of our conversation? All of you would be like, no, 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 that's too difficult. That's too challenging. In a month, we're about to send out the invitation this week, right? So it's something that's possible, and that's what people don't believe in it. But
Hmm.
when things, the energy wants to move, the same in the transition working group, that's the listening.
Right.
When is the timing ready,
Yeah.
right? And I feel the timing is ready. It's just, are we getting ready for it too? How do we prepare ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about the way that you talk about this is not saying that you're the expert and people should work like this, right? So, because I was listening to Barry, I forgot his last name, but he's from the channel Barry Economics on YouTube. I will link his in the show notes. And
Hmm.
Barry was talking about how channels like these great experts who have these interviews, podcast interviews with all these other experts, like the guy who interviews all these CEOs.
Yeah.
And he says actually what he's doing is the opposite of making us better. What he's doing is just showing us stories of people who are looking now back on their career and saying this has worked for me, right? So
Yeah.
you should
Yeah.
copy that, and because this is
Yeah.
working,
Yeah.
which is not true. It just worked in your instant and just worked in this situation, and you were just very lucky that this. Because if you say if you get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, you do like a cold bath and you do read and you do all this other stuff, right? That makes you
Yeah.
successful. That's the rule, which is not true because there's millions of people doing that and are not successful in the capitalistic kind of way. They're just doing their thing. I myself like to have these conversations like with you, not
Yeah.
because I think that we should copy the way they work,
Mm,
but
mm.
I'm asking you these questions to see what can I learn and what can I use to experiment with? What can I use to, kind of like
Yeah.
use this and see if this works for me and how
Yeah.
would it work for me? And
Yeah.
then, hopefully somebody who's listening to this conversation or a couple of people listening to this conversation do the same thing. They go like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it, not transactional, but maybe relational. And if we do that with more people, I think we are getting to a better world
It's a
because
domino effect.
yeah, so that's why I love having these conversations like with you now is to see what can we pick and choose for ourselves, not being like copy the whole thing and think, oh, this is the way that makes me successful. This is how
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
projects and
Yeah. Yeah.
really run the show. No, that's not how it works. You have to find your own way how it works for you.
Yeah.
But my guess is that if you look at like you just mentioned, like scarcity and look like transactional, you're not going to have a happy life, right? You're going to have maybe,
It's going to be more challenging, and you have to do it again and again and again. There's no flow, right?
yeah, yeah.
So my question to you now, Erno, knowing this, what fits for your context that you can experiment something concrete as of tomorrow? No need for money, no need, just your own resources. What would that look like?
I think I'm already doing that, but you make it very specific. You say tomorrow, huh?
Mm-hmm. Because people wait like, oh, I have to wait until my energy is here. I have to wait for money. I have to wait for this. But what can you do tomorrow that is so free right now?
Yeah, no, I don't wait for the energy. I don't. I have an
Yeah.
appointment with somebody. I had a conversation in a podcast before, and we talked about this idea of green mentors, and she mentioned it and go like, oh, that sounds interesting. Well, we can look into that. So I used the chat, which is the French version of
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and had a conversation with it and talking about so what does like green mentors look like for you? And of course,
Mhm.
the chat knows me because I've
Yeah.
put a lot of
Yeah.
information there, and
Yeah.
he goes like, oh, this is really related to the work you do there. This is how you can use it there, and I go like, yeah, that's really interesting. So we're gonna have it, and not tomorrow. We're gonna have a conversation in May
Yeah.
in person.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
and building the relationship there.
Yeah.
And I had this. last Monday, I had last Tuesday, I had a conversation with somebody who wrote Trias Economica. It's a new book, it's in
Yeah.
Dutch, but it's a really interesting topic of how we can build economics differently because
Yeah.
we need to separate the powers, right? Like
Yes.
Trias Politica, it's separating the powers in the financial, economical world.
Yeah.
And the day before, she had the book launch, and I have the house and everything going on, but I thought, okay, it's going to be really important for me to be at the book launch. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no clue. Nothing happened yet, but I don't know. But the thing was, it feels really important for me to be there. And it felt like I was building connections with people that I spoke before in the podcast or have meetings online with.
Mhm.
I have never seen them, so I met them at this event. So to me, that was a really good reason to be at that event, to just do that. So again, I'm not dividing your question. Tomorrow,
Oh,
I have a meeting with
yes.
six HR people who want
Yes.
to learn more about IDG of the larger companies in the Netherlands. I'm
Mhm.
doing it together with Chantal,
Yes.
with the
Yes.
event,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna, yeah, I'm just gonna accept and listen more in this meeting.
Okay. Listen. And what would be a question that you can ask them that will give you some knowledge where they are, what patterns are showing up for them?
Yes, we have a couple of questions in the beginning of our meeting that we so
Yeah.
what I've also determined when I do like workshops or events like this,
Mhm.
I don't want to do them on my own anymore. I want to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
people with me so we can collaborate.
Co-facilitators.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one thing. And the other thing is, I don't want to have like a great preparation. I don't want to have like
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
worked out how I should
Yeah.
teach them about IDGs. No,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
about experimenting and going on. So we
Yeah.
have like three questions
Yeah.
about how they look at the things that are going on in their lives and
Yeah.
how one of maybe two skills from the guide, as it's
Mm-hmm.
called today, um,
Mm-hmm.
could help them in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Next step would be how this is true for their organization that they're working with, how they feel
Mm-hmm.
this could be, what skills could be important for them, maybe just one. And then we move to, because there are six AR professionals of these large
Mm-hmm.
companies, how in this community of these six HR, what domain would they focus on?
Yeah.
One of the five domains of the
Yeah.
guide. So
Yeah.
so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna focus on them to see, okay, what kind
Mm.
of skill is it that you feel is important to you to work on right now?
So can I suggest, as you asked first for listening, before you go into the skills, give them an experience of before and after.
Hmm.
So before knowing the skills guide, what is it that you do to address this challenge?
Right.
Let's say we collaborate this, we do this A, B, C, D. And then, they go, okay, what does that look like? Be very specific. And then now you go, okay, now let's take that same challenge. And if you went through the inner guide of relating or collaborating, what would that look like? But obviously, you would have to give them an experience first. And now you go before and after. So the before without the IDG guide, because right now you're trying to sell the IDG guide, but let it sell itself
Right.
through the experience of this is before. Now I can see what would be the difference. And then I embrace the IDG, right? So that's what I'm talking about, being resourceful and not like trying to sell the or promote the guide. Let it sell itself.
Right.
But for them to actually, like the same thing I do at the transition working group, I don't tell you what to do. You get a lived practice of, oh, that's what we did before, and this is what it is. And now we understand it, right? So this is the same thing. You give them an embodied experience of what they do now, then give them an embodied experience, what it would look like if they use an ID. Then you can take through all the rest. because they already can see without you telling them, oh, look, this is all the positive. But if they experience it themselves, they don't need it. You can ask them, tell us what you think is the positive now or the negative, right? So it can also be critique, but then you can address the critique.
Thank you. Thank you, Mila.
That's how I learned from the sales and marketing, and saying we never sell,
Yeah.
we
No, no,
never promote.
yeah, no, I don't want to sell that either. I
No,
just
no, but
want,
even promote. They don't even promote the
no, no,
product.
I want
Yeah,
to just have them an experience with it. That's what my intention is for the
yeah.
meeting for tomorrow. Yeah.
And the best is always before and after, and they
Yeah.
get their own insight.
Yeah. Okay, Mila.
There you go.
I, I I think we have something concrete here and also a
Well,
great
you
example.
said you wanted to learn something, so
Yeah,
now
yeah,
you've got.
yeah, yeah. No, I learned not just one thing. I learned many things today, so that's
Okay.
important for me. Um, as a listener, I also hope that you have something that you really think can take away from this conversation. And I really enjoy working with you
Me too.
without without putting up on a pedestal, right? I
Oh, I
really
would hate it. I would
yeah,
absolutely hate it. Yeah.
yeah, I really enjoy working with you, and I really living the experience. So seeing what's going on, feeling what's going on, trusting the process, trusting what's coming from this without worrying too much about things that may go wrong or things that might not go the way that, well, I didn't plan anything, but
Yeah.
the way that people plan. I just trust your experience. I trust the people's experience. I trust the participants who are there, what they bring and what they, you know, may question or experience or share. And from that, something will happen. That's what I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah, it's all experimentation,
Yeah.
right? So it's adaptive action one after another that will inform the next. So think about how many times we screwed up at the forum. Did it make everybody else never show up? No, they actually loved it that we screwed up. And we told them with transparency, we experimented, it didn't work so well. So we're going to now iterate in real time in your, with you being witness. And it actually creates vulnerability creates that trust, right? And the other part about being on a pedestal, what I learned being on, and having to lead so many hundreds and hundreds of projects that people were looking at me as a leader. The problem with pedestal that I've learned is there's no way down.
Hmm.
And with someone who has a narrative, I'm not good enough, which I've had since I was a child, that I had to learn to work with, that makes it even more problematic. Because if I put on pedestal, oh my God, they're going to find out how much of an imposter I am. Right? And so it's harder. So then you perform, you pretend to be somebody you're not. And eventually it just becomes so difficult to continue. Something will break, right? And I've seen it again and again and again. Gurus, thought leaders. We're human, we're messy, we're very complicated. We're not always good, we're not always bad. But to put somebody on a pedestal, we're giving our power away. And they're also losing their power because they constantly have to perform to perception of who they are, but they're not that. So that's why I prefer not to have website. I prefer that people ask me, do you want to write books or podcasts? And I'm like, no, it's too much work. I'm like, I really like being myself and that I don't have to show any kind of performance to be on a pedestal because I'm just truly like, I'm a procrastinator and I love just being me, and that I don't have to create more narratives in my already very, very loud, I'm not good enough, I'm an imposter. The amount of times that comes out at every forum, at every time I have to show up in public, because it's just there. It's a narrative that's been going on for many, many people, and we never question why we have to be perfect.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
none of us are perfect, right? So
Hmm.
it's It's that pedestal thing that is thing. And that's why I prefer to work in collaboration in participatory process because it gives the most joy and the most satisfaction when we come together, like what we did in Amsterdam. Look, I mean, this is giving me so much joy. And it's Ivy, it's you guys, everybody coming together without really no one leading. It's like everybody is leading, but everybody's following, and it's happening so naturally. And that's why I felt Amsterdam was it. And this is when you ask me, how would I know a client? If you were guys my client, I would go with you completely because I can see the energy. It goes and flows. Even if we find challenges or conflict, I'm pretty sure we can overcome it.
Yeah, I really enjoy this. So by way of what I think is working for me is just asking questions and listening. That's what I really love doing, right?
Yeah.
Having these
Yep.
conversations in the podcast, doing this as my coaching job. I
Yes.
really not job. I really enjoy asking questions and listening. And I also like organizing events, bringing people together without just being the lead, but just making
Yeah.
sure the event happens so that we have,
Yeah.
okay, we say, I'm going to pick a date like you just do, pick a date, and then we're going to do the event. I
Yeah.
don't care how it's going to happen. We're going to do the event at the date. That's the only thing that I really am good at, picking a date
Yeah.
and making sure that's going to happen. For the rest,
Yeah.
I don't care who's on a stage. I don't care what's going to happen. As long as people come together and we have fun and
Yeah.
we enjoy and we get
Doesn't
something
have to
great.
be perfect. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be perfect. It can be low profile and we still have fun, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and now it's really coming together.
It is. Mila,
Yes,
thank
thank you
you.
so
Thank you
much.
very much. I really enjoyed this conversation
I did
and
too.
we'll speak to you another time.
And Erno, thank you for the questions. It was really very it was, what is it called? Thought provoking. Thank you,
Thank
Erno.
you.
Goodbye.
Dat was het mooie gesprek met Mila. Je vindt de naam en links dat we noemden in het artikel dat bij deze uitzending hoort. Ga daarvoor naar decideforimpact.com/show 492. Wil je de volgende aflevering van deze podcast vanzelf op je telefoon ontvangen? Dat kan heel eenvoudig. Heb je een iPhone, dan zit daar standaard de Apple Podcast app op. Open deze app en zoek daarna de Decide for Impact podcast. En klik op abonneer. Heb je een Android-telefoon, installeer dan eerst bijvoorbeeld het Player FM app. Open deze app dan en zoek daarna de Decide for Impact podcast. Of zoek op de bekende podcast apps. En klik op abonneer. Dankjewel hiervoor. Heb je vragen, opmerkingen of een reactie op deze aflevering met Mila of op de podcast in het algemeen? Stuur dan een e-mail naar podcast@decideforimpact.com. Ik hoor super graag van jou. Wil je leren hoe je focus en energie vindt met jouw innerlijke kompas? Hoe verbinding in je team het verschil maakt? Hoe je vertrouwen krijgt in je collega's en hoe je een moedig mens wordt? Download dan het boek Impact Besluiten waarmee je nieuwe medewerkers aantrekt op decideforimpact.com. Dit is mijn laatste boek en je downloadt het daarom helemaal gratis. Je hebt zelfs geen e-mailadres nodig. Vraag jouw boek nu aan op decideforimpact.com. En ik weet, je hebt een volle agenda, je leest het in 1 avond tijd. Dankjewel voor het luisteren en graag tot de volgende.